Your time is super valuable, so I thought I'll make this video and also use it to hand off to any potential developers in the future so they know exactly what's going on with their tech stack. The biggest thing I'd like to point out is we have a very manual system. It's not like code where we could actually just automate or copy or even code to duplicate features. In this case, you're looking at here is an example of our agent flow in NAN. This particularly handles the grunt work of sorting out what calls happen and when, and the outcomes, whether it's booked, whether it's a callback requested, or whether it's a failed call. And in this case, you see the issue is that for every node, we call these boxes, we have to manually configure them. So here, for example, this is for Betty agent. It has to go into Google Drive for Betty, and then we have to be able to check that it's actually the file that belongs to this call. And then we have to configure at the end the Airtable so that we can receive this link to be put in. Now this is showing red because every time we need to connect these, we need to actually run the flow beforehand. So you see here this green area, this line of green is basically configuring a node one by one and then hitting run so that they turn green until you get to the very end, right? And this one we haven't gotten to yet. So just to show you the workflow we have for cloning, then every single one of these nodes basically, if there's data uh, that's custom, that's for just that school. For example, here for Betty, we have some fields that are shared, like customer name, number, email. But then we also have some fields that might just be used for Betty, and these configuration is what takes most of our time. For any one of our flows, we have about 10 nodes that needs to be configured for the particular agent. And then we have about 5 that are for the type. So for our booking agents, they can share some of these nodes in common, but then there's still nodes that are different between the different types of booking agents. Betty is very similar to our school booking agents. That's why this is a good example to show you the scope of work that is involved to duplicate just one flow for a booking agent. And for a booking agent, we actually have 3 flows. So we have this here. Just to zoom out, we've upgraded from V1 to V2. So the process of going from this to this, basically, you don't have to do when you're cloning. But just so you know, the number of nodes that need to be changed as you upgrade is also on the order of 10 to 15 nodes that you had to manually configure. And then when you look at all the different flows, Y3, well, this one here is the first one in the agent workflow. This will initiate a call. So here again, you have to set certain things like the calendar, which school it belongs to, also the specific fields and the time zones that are available. These could be cloned if you have similar, copied if you have similar features between the schools. But what's not copyable here is that every school will have its own agent because it will have its own VAPI assistant. So here, this is the part where we need to also clone the different agents for each school. I did my best to make this as reusable as possible. So this big chunk here is actually reusable because we use variables, right? So when you say agent name, for example, this flow is smart enough to inject the agent name here. So you don't have to touch VAPI to change the agent name, but you still have to change this in the NAN flow, right? Right here, this flow is the one that calls. So all the data that you pass into the VAPI system, basically, you have to configure that differently. A different flow, different variables for each of the different type of schools, right? So again, here you have about 5 or so that need to be configured for that, including the Slack notification where you have to change the name to the school and whatever message it is to tailor towards the announcement you want for the school. So just to recap, we have 3 flows per agent, and then between each flow, there's about 10, I would say. So as a whole, you have about on the order of 30 different nodes you have to manually set. And because when you're manually setting, you're never, free from human error. That's why it's very important to run the nodes one by one. And when they green, you set them properly. Right? Every time I don't do this, I regret it later because Murphy's law, some error will happen, and you realize, oh man, I mistyped this, and then a bunch of calls will go wrong on live. We don't ever want that. So before we go live on production, after we clone the agent, we always do a test node by node to see that we've set these all correctly. So this procedure basically of manual setting, that's not something that you would need to do if you're coding, say, in another language like Python, but in the end, that's unavoidable. And that's not to mention the actual tables this is linked to. For example, here we have an Airtable for Bevy. So what that looks like is this. We have actually two bases on this Airtable, right? And they both have to be cloned. One is a log of all the calls. The other is all the bookings. And so this table and the two bases need to be duplicated as well for every school agent. And then when you have created these Airtables, you would then change the Airtable configuration here so that it can go to the right Airtable as well, right? So to sum that up, you have the Airtables that need to be cloned, and sometimes you need to change some fields on the Airtable depending on what the schools need, and then you have to reflect that change in the N8N flow. There's only one flow usually that touches Airtable, and which is this one. But sometimes you might even have Airtables up here, like here. We have to check time zone. So this is a special case where we have to get another Airtable that checks time zone, right? And then lastly, on the VAPI side, you had to clone the assistant, and then you had to both configure the voice you want, because every assistant should sound different, even though the prompt is the same. And then all the way in the bottom, there is a part where it's called messaging, but this is where you configure the assistant to send the call data to this workflow that we showed first. And this is the one that handles what happened during the call. So you have to then point that assistant back to this. These are things you have to configure differently for every new assistant created. And of course, if you have a different voicemail, different name for the school, you have to put that here as well. Now, I also want to point out that most of the time this won't change, but if you want to actually change what's returned in every call, that's the structured data. And here you must actually keep an eye on it, because if some school have different requirements, this is what basically tells us now what happened during the call. We're using VAPI to basically return that data. And you'll see that this is actually deprecated. So VAPI also is updating their platform constantly. And while this won't fail immediately, eventually you will want to migrate this to a new version that they're looking for, right? So this is an ongoing thing. We haven't used this for more than a few months, and it's already deprecated. So just to keep in mind, these are things that need to evolve as the platform on VAPI evolves. But just to recap on the VAPI side, you would need to clone, you need to duplicate an agent by going up here. And then you have to change the name, the settings that we describe, the voice model, the messaging at the bottom, all the way at the bottom. And also, I wanted to point out that if you have a tool, like for example, you wanted to check the calendar during a call, we still have the option available if the user insists on a time that is way outside norm. In that case, you had to then create your tools here as well. So then you first go to the tool section, right? And you see how that we have all these tools. Some of them you can just use as template. They're for booking and checking. And you would basically create a tool. You would then create the field that you want to extract. So for booking, you need to specify this. Now, again, most of the time you can just copy and paste, but I would suggest that you actually, if you're to do this, pay serious attention to which name belongs to which, because every tool can only go to one different webhook. And this is the one where I was showing in the middle, right? So essentially you can have a tool that goes to every single school, that works for every single school, because eventually that tool has to call the specific checking workflow for that school. And that's why you have to have a different tool for every school. Okay, so to sum up on VAPI side, you have the assistant, you have the tools, right, and then you have at the end the structured data that's used to return the data of the call, and these have to be cloned and adjusted for every different school as well. Okay, I would say about 80% of the work is in after you made all these settings. Make sure like testing every single one of them as you're making the settings, and then afterwards, what I do is I would trigger the call, and then I would actually do a run through with a live agent, so you see everything working together. So in this case, I'm triggering a call for Betty, and it will actually call me. And what I'm going to do is answer the call and then see how each of these in the executions are running. So here I'm getting a call. Okay.
Hi, this is Betty from CDL Expert. Who am I speaking with?
This is Bob.
Hi, Bob. I am Betty, a virtual employee with CDL Expert, calling on a recorded line. I'm calling to demonstrate our capabilities firsthand and see if I can help you streamline your enrollment. Do you have a quick moment to learn more about the program?
No, actually, I'm busy right now. Can you call me back tomorrow?
I completely understand. Should I try you back later this afternoon, or would tomorrow morning work better?
Tomorrow morning.
Thank you for sharing that. Tomorrow morning it is. What time in the morning would be most convenient for you?
9 a.m.
Got it. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'll make sure to give you a call then. Thank you, Bob, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. Okay, so in that call in particular, I did not make a booking, and I did not ask for a special time. So I should see here in the execution that it did not run this particular flow, because this flow here is for checking a time outside of what was recommended. And in this case, I didn't. So you see that there's no new execution, but you do see that there is a new call execution. That's the one that I clicked. Yeah. And then what we want to do is make sure that every single node here is green. And then the call data that we sent to the assistant is what it says. So Bob, my name, my email, my time zone, right? And this is information then should be logged back into our system after the call. Okay. So by the way, I added this here so you can see very easily all these information at a glance. This is part of our scaling work to make that accessible. And now if you go to the call post call flow where it processes what happened in call, you see that now we have a new entry here, and it should actually book this one because even though I asked for a callback, I gave a specific time. So in those I'm interested, and now it should be calling me back with more information about the school rather than asking me to schedule another call. That was a new logic we added that we think makes this the best calling agent for this industry, because I don't think anyone else is trying to convert these I'm busy moments into actual bookings. And so you see that we have all the information here. This is a real booking, a real events created. And I think I said tomorrow morning. So you booked me for 8 a.m. I asked for 9, but I'm on Eastern time, and this is Mark's calendar. So this is converted into his time zone on Central 8. And you see everything here works perfectly, right? So all that stuff, if you were to do it, that's what making a new agent is supposed to be like. And then everything is green, and then you can say, okay, now I can deploy this for production.